Greetings, my magnificent ones. Sue Paulson here, your Magnificence mentor. Welcome to Pathways to Magnificence. It is Tuesday, the first Tuesday of September, September the 3rd, and we're all maybe still a little groggy from the long weekend and trying to pack in all the merriment possible before fall and school starts in earnest. Today's topic is one that's near and dear to my heart. It's all about near-death experiences and what we might learn from them. Now, some of you watching this may already know that I had a near-death experience in 2007. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about my experience as such. What I really wanted to focus on today is what all these experiences that people have had all over the world for many years now, what they might have in common. Are there some common threads or themes or feelings that run through all of them, regardless of the individual nature of each person's experience? So if you're curious about my own experience, well, it was so significant for me that, of course, I wrote a book. And so here it is. Oh, I don't know if you can see it. Not that easily. There it is. Magnificent Misery, From Adversity to Ecstasy. It's available at Amazon. So if you're curious to see what I experienced, it's all there. Raw, real, unvarnished, and you know. All right, so let's get to our topic today. So I really wanted to get as current a piece of information or bits of information as I could. So this last week, I was on YouTube and I just simply typed in the search bar near-death experiences. Well, there was just a wealth of shorter and longer videos, some podcasts on there with people relating what had happened to them, what they experienced, and how that all impacted them, not only at that time, but then for many years since then. To say that it is a unimaginable experience that is very hard to describe would be true. The putting human words to something that is so beyond what we've come to know in our existence on the human plane is pretty tricky. And I'm not sure we really have language for it. Nonetheless, the experiences are real, and we do the best we can to explain what's going on. So you've probably, if you've had your own experience or you've heard about other experiences, you'll know that sometimes people see a light, sometimes they go through a tunnel, sometimes they see loved ones, sometimes they meet with a council of elders. Sometimes it's none of that, but there's a common thread that seems to weave through about the essence of the experience, I guess, the knowing that people came away with. And I would say that it's an unshakable knowing. Once you experience it, once you feel it, it becomes such a part of you that it's unshakable. So even if I had musings that oh well, maybe that didn't really happen, it was so far out of my realm of possibilities or what I ever thought could happen to me, and it shook up my world in such a way that I couldn't deny that it was there, that I experienced it, that it was part of me. So what are the basic themes that run through all of these near-death experiences, or what are at least the most common ones? So let me just share my screen and we'll go through them one at a time here so that we can talk about them a little more specifically. All right, let me just put this on slideshow. There we go. So as I mentioned, I wanted to really delve into the experience from the perspective of what can we learn from them and how can we apply that to our lives now? Because if you've been next to the work that I'm doing for a while now, you know I'm all about the magnificence of each of us and creating heaven on earth. You know that. And so how can a near-death experience, even if we personally haven't had one, impact us in such a way that it gives us some focus on how to have more heaven on earth, how to experience that more in our own lives? Excuse me. So let's look at the common themes and we'll go through them one by one. So of course, the first feeling that is utmost in people's hearts in a near-death experience is unconditional love. And what is unconditional love? Well, it's love without conditions is the simple answer. And it's bigger than that in lots of ways. I think there's no, it's difficult to describe the love that source has for its various bits. If um, you believe in God, then we're God's children, and the love that God feels for his children is unconditional. It's all encompassing. So unconditional love runs through when people, maybe in their own lives and certainly in mine, I lived in a state and still do to a large extent a state of conditional love, that there's expectations and there's other things that I don't feel unconditionally loved in many ways, except when I'm connecting with my creator. Then I do. And there are certain people in my life that I feel unconditional love from. So that's the first one. And hand in hand with that is no judgment or condemnation. So God and the universe don't judge our thoughts, our feelings, our inactions, or our inactions. It's just not there. Judgment is man-made. We are the ones that have placed this level of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's right, what's wrong. And it sprang from wanting to experience contrast, but I think we've carried it a little too far. And so if my preference is different than your preference, does that make you wrong? No. Does that make me wrong? No. But it can if we allow it to. So this is where we really want to pay attention to what is this judgment all about, and how does it sabotage our opportunity to love unconditionally? Same thing with, I threw in the word condemnation there because one of the podcasts that I was watching, the Next Level Soul podcast with Alex Ferrari, his guest was Michael Tamura, who had been a spiritual healer and an intuitive for many, many years. And he was talking about the idea that because let's face it, if we're back in source energy, all is revealed. There are no secrets, there are no hidden things. So every thought we've ever thought, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, every action or inaction that we've taken, whether it was quotes right, wrong, or even very horrible, it's revealed, it's known. It's not it's just there. It's part of the map that's written about your life and all the actions that are there. But there's no condemnation. There's no finger pointing and said, you shouldn't have done that. Wow, that was a bad thing you did. Why did you make that mistake? What was going on there? There's none of that coming from source. Source is saying, well, hey, you experienced what you experienced based on the choices you made, and it's all good. It was all for growth, all for learning. And so there's no condemnation. We are the ones who have become, in an odd kind of way, very expert at judging and condemning others. And of course, when we do that, we also judge ourselves. So there's conditions attached to whether we give our love or how much of our love we give, and that's not the way it is on the other side. So number 3, a feeling of peace. There's just this enveloping sense of peace, whether an individual experiences beautiful fields of amazing flowers and scenery that is so beautiful you just want to sink down into it and never leave, or whether it's just this pervading feeling that just makes your heart swell and warms you. That feeling of peace is there, and it's honestly quite a relief from what we tend to experience here on Earth. So no wonder no one wants to leave when they have an opportunity to cross over. So there's feeling of that feeling of peace. The one that struck me personally very hard and strong was the idea that all are deserving and worthy. That was not how I was brought up. I was brought up to believe that you had to earn your place, that if you and God were going to be connected in some way, you had to be worthy of his/her/its consideration, that as if there was this deity on high and you were this lowly something or other. And so step by step, bit by bit, well, I worked most of my life doing what I felt was important to do to measure up. I was as good as I could be. I served, I was humble, all these things that I thought was going to earn my place, only to discover in my own experience that my place is already secure because I exist. I didn't have to do anything. I was already part of it all. I just didn't know it. The separation I felt was my own separation. It was a mistaken belief, I guess, that I was not separate from God and the universe. I was an integral part of it, just as everyone is. So and this is where it might be a little difficult to suspend our judgment and think, well, is the worst sinner in the world that we've seen, and we can name them, we can well, what about and go through it all. Well, what about them? How come they were so bad? They can't be worthy, are they? Yep, they are. That was difficult for me to wrap my head around, especially when I had felt so strongly that I had to earn my place. And so if I saw others who weren't working as diligently as I was, I'm thinking, well, I can't even get a place. What makes you think you can get a place? Only to discover I was mistaken. That was wrong. All my beliefs about that were just fabrications. And so that gave me a big pause for sure. So all of us, everyone, every soul who is a part of the cosmos is deserving and worthy just because they exist. They don't have to do anything for that. There's nothing to earn. It's just, even if you don't acknowledge it, you're part of it. And of course, it's better if you can come to acknowledge that you are deserving and worthy, because then you'll go looking for your chair around the banquet table and you'll say, okay, well then if I'm worthy and deserving, where's my chair? Oh, well, just keep looking, you'll find it. And there it is. Well, all that's required then, if you choose, is to just pull the chair out and sit down and say, oh, this is my chair. Look at this banquet. Wow, this is pretty cool. So there's this, and I don't know too many opportunities on planet Earth where you don't have to earn your way somehow. There's just freely given. It's just as abundant as you could possibly want, and it's all there. You just simply receive. So that's pretty cool. All right. Free will. We've known, or at some point in time, if you have any I suppose, religious, biblical, spiritual training or understanding whatsoever, you have heard that well, we have free will. Well, there will be some lines of thought that will say, yeah, we have free will, as long as, well, the second that you put a condition on it, it's not free anymore. So free will means you pick. It's your choice. You're in control. You get to decide, yes, this, not that. I'm going to think this. I'm not going to think that. I'm going to feel this. I'm not going to feel that. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. At any point in your life, and sometimes many times throughout the day, you choose. I guess the only responsibility that's part of that then is that then we accept the consequences of that choice. And of course, if we didn't like what we picked, guess what? We get to pick again. That's what free will is. You get to pick over and over. And sometimes we pick the same thing several times with the same crazy making results and go, oh, maybe I better pick something different, because every time I do that, it's like hitting your head against the wall. Well, the only way it stops hurting is if you stop hitting your head against the wall. So time to decide to do something different. So that's what free will is all about. And the last one that I'll mention, and I suspect there are even more than this, but based on the videos that I went through this last week, these are the most common ones. That all is perfection in the universe. That now, I probably, if there were a bunch of you here with me, some of you might argue and say, look at the state of the world. How in the world can you say all is perfection? Well, if we broaden the scope, if we take it up higher and get it as big as we can get it in relation to the whole universe, not just planet Earth, but the whole universe, and include everything and everybody in that, whatever's happening is perfection as far as the universe is concerned. So it doesn't concern itself with some of the tiny earthly concerns that we have. It doesn't concern itself about the universe, about the environment, for example. It doesn't concern itself about the breakdown of this structure or that structure, or the fact that there's homelessness or poverty or whatever. In the eyes of the universe, it's all happening for us and for a good reason. So it's all perfection. It's just that we, in our limited perspective, don't get it. So one example that someone gave me a long time ago was, if you imagine that you're on let's say a tabletop in the Grand Canyon, and you're facing forward, and let's say you're facing south, and so what your eyes see straight ahead and a little bit of off to the left and off to the right, that's what you see. So you might shout out to the friend who's on the opposite side looking north, and you say, oh, I see this and this. Can you see that? And the person on the north says, well, no, I don't see that. I see this, and this, and this. And so each person around that circumference of that tabletop will have a slightly different viewing point, and they can only see what they can see. So they may see what is to them an imperfection, and someone else may see something entirely different. Well, of course, if you take a helicopter ride way above this tabletop, you can see 360 degrees, and you can see everything that most people on the tabletop can't see. Well, you can see that all is perfection, all is beautiful, all is wondrous way up there. We can't, in our limited field of vision and our limited understanding of all of that. So I guess in some ways, it's really a leap of faith then to say to the universe, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll have to take your word for it that all is perfection. We're not too sure how, we're not too sure what that looks like, but what if we said, well, all is perfection and things are always working out the way they're meant to work. It's all for the growth of the universe and for the growth of all of us. So those are some of the common themes, the common threads, the common feelings that come through. And believe me, some of these I wrestled with, and to a certain extent still wrestle with a little bit, because my human understanding is not as large as what's going on in the universe. And so I have lots of examples that jump out at me from time to time to get me questioning yet again. Is that really true? Is what I believe or what I'm thinking, is that true, or is there more to this than meets the eye? All right. I thought it would be helpful then to go back to the Magnificence matrix in looking at how these various aspects, such as unconditional love, weigh in. So if you haven't seen this matrix before, let me just give you the quick version, a quick explanation. So we have the vertical line or scale, where 10 is high personal power. So your own sense of how much power you have in the world is way up here to 10, or conversely, it could slide down to as low as 1. 1 is being very low personal power. You don't believe you have a whole lot of power in your world to affect your world. Then the horizontal scale starts from 1 as seeing the environment that you're in as very unfriendly, working through towards the right to as big as a 10, which is you consider the world to, or your environment, to be very friendly. And of course, we live in different environments, right? So we might have a work environment that we see as very unfriendly, and we might have a home environment that we see as very friendly, and everything in between. So it's very situationally based on where we might feel that we're at. Now, so it divides itself into, when we intersect these lines, then we have a 4-quadrant matrix. So if you have a sense of 5+ to 10 very friendly environment and 5+ to 10 high personal power, this is the heaven on earth mode, where we feel that sense of peace, that sense of joy, that sense of acceptance, not only of ourselves, but maybe from others. We trust ourselves and we trust other people. Well, this is where unconditional love has the biggest chance of growing, where we accept people where they are, we accept ourselves where we are, and we love that, and we honor it. So that's the heaven on earth mode. Well, the other 3 quadrants, as you can see, are not as close to heaven on earth as we might like. They break themselves into 3 distinct parts. If we look at the upper left, where a person would have a higher sense of personal power, but does not see their environment as very friendly, then there's some fear around that. There's a sense of not trusting others, and judgment big time will happen in here, that they notice quite quickly what they believe is wrong in the world and do what they need to. They judge that, and then they do what they need to fight against or fight through or whatever. So this is where the sword is drawn out at the ready, and the basis of it is definitely fear, but it shows up more as anger and frustration, and there's not a lot of regard for unconditional love in this. There's everything has a condition on it, for sure. Now, below that, in the lower level of low personal power and also a very unfriendly environment, there's also fear, but the fear relates more to, I can't trust myself or others. I can't trust myself. Not that I don't, but I can't. Like, I don't believe in my ability to trust myself, and I don't believe that I can trust others. So there's this quest almost for invisibility. Like, I just need to keep my head down and stay out of the way. So in the fight, flee, freeze mentality, then warrior mode would be fight. Victim mode would be flee, and it could be physically flee, or it could be just flee in your head, like you go somewhere else when you shut down, is basically what I'm saying here. And you could also freeze. So both of those would be applicable here. There's this sense that you have no choice in what's going on around you, that you're a victim of your circumstances, you're a victim of the world around you, and you, because you don't believe you have a whole lot of power, then you might hang out in not only self-judgment, but judging the world around you, and also some unworthiness that well, I have no right to anything more because I'm not worthy. And there's this sense of not really knowing how to get out of that either. So that's the victim mode. And then if we go over to the right, we look at survivor mode, where this is the go along to get along kind of perspective. There's this still not a whole lot of personal power, but this sense that, well, I think the world's pretty friendly. Other people seem to be managing well, and just not me. And so there's this fear that well, I can't trust myself because I don't think I'm strong enough, or I don't think I know enough, or there's all these reasons for that. And this struggle for perfection, this, well, I just need to measure up somehow. Maybe if I take more courses, maybe if I sit beside a really smart person, maybe if I find a guru that can lead me out of this, then that's where I'm at. Lots of unmet expectations in this arena where it just seems so conditional. Well, if I do this, then maybe I can get that. And when it doesn't happen, there's some real disappointment, and I guess the fingers pointed back at oneself. I've spent lots of years in survivor mode where I just, okay, I'm settling for less because I don't know how to get more, and or if I can trust myself to have more or hang on to more. And there's this sense of not feeling worthy. So people with lower personal power tend to have a component of unworthiness to their belief system, where they just aren't too sure that they deserve to have a better life, to get more than what they have currently. So when we look at the challenges of coming into unconditional love, coming into the heaven on earth mode to accept everyone as they are, find peace, joy, contentment, all those kinds of things. Well, we have lots of programs, lots of stories that we tell ourselves that could put us into one of these modes, or we'll have life events and triggers that will have us placing ourselves in one of these modes. So I had a little example the other day. I was busy driving, and I'm stopped at a stoplight with my left turn signal on, ready when the traffic cleared from oncoming to turn left when the light turned green. There's two lanes of us, and typically the right lane either turns right or they go straight ahead. So there's a little car next to me and a little bit ahead of me, but not very far. Well, all of a sudden, when the light turns green and I'm about to step on the gas to turn left because there was no oncoming traffic, this little car jumps right in front of me and turns left. And I'm startled, right? Like, whoa, where did that come from? And so then I'm annoyed because I'm thinking, well, that was kind of a bonehead move for that driver to make. And and it was so interesting that now I didn't know why they did it. I didn't know who they were. And so, but the impact on me, I felt was a bit negative because my adrenaline shot up and I could have easily had an accident, although fortunately I didn't. And so I'm kind of bristling a little bit as I'm driving along, and then triggered into my awareness was not acceptance of this other person or their behavior. I went right into judgment. And I probably was a little bit in warrior mode when I went there. I'm judging this person, and old, what would you call that? Old mistaken beliefs from my past just jumped right out. And immediately I assumed that it was a woman driver. And because I'm reasonably self-aware, as soon as this thought pops into my head, I'm thinking, well, now how do I know it's a woman driver? I'm a woman driver. I think I'm a very good driver. Why would I assume it's a woman driver? And of course, I can hear my dad and other male figures in my life, cursing, woman driver. so so this is part of my history and part of my makeup. I didn't even know it was still there exactly. Well, I see this particular driver doing some other kind of weird things on the road, and I'm going, whoa, what's up with this driver? Well, I happened to get close enough that I turned my head and look. It is not a woman driver. It's a young man in the front seat and I'm driving, and I'm going, oh, interesting. That's interesting. And then I just carried on my merry way. But how quickly I was not in unconditional love at that moment. I might have been 5 minutes before this happened, but I certainly was not there when that happened. So it amazed me how quickly we can revert back to old programming, even though hey, heaven on earth, that's where I want to be. And I like to be there as often as possible. Am I? Well, I'm there a certain amount, but there's no question that these other quadrants, based on whatever experiences I'm having in a day, will pull me out of that. And they're not going to get my love without some conditions on it, because I'm upset about something, or I had expectations, and it led me differently. So I wanted to present this as another way of looking at, if we're how quickly judgment pulls us out of unconditional love, and our feelings of peace just get mushed because it's just not there for us. So, all right, let's go to the next slide here. So one of the questions that I had for everyone, and this is for you to think about, and I'll add my comments because at the moment I have nobody to discuss this with. So is unconditional love attainable? That's a big question. So can we love someone else without conditions? So think about a brand new set of parents and their brand new baby. Well, certainly when that baby is first born, I think most parents do experience this sense of unconditional love, just as animals have this regard for their babies. Same thing in the human condition, that for the most part, mothers specifically, and fathers too, I think the bond between mother and child is just that stronger because she's birthed this baby. However, the male regard for that child is every bit as strong. And so I think in those first moments, that unconditional love is there. So how does it get usurped or sabotaged? Well, if you have a colicky baby that cries endlessly for hours and hours and hours on end with no respite for the parents, and they're sleep deprived and they're at their wits' end because they're new parents and they haven't the foggiest clue of what to do next, that sense of unconditional love tends to wane, I would suspect. And we can get to the point where the conditions start coming. Well, I'll love this child a whole lot more if only they'll stop crying. If only I could get a good night's sleep. If only. And so the conditions start piling on just because of the sheer difficulty in dealing with that situation. So I think it is attainable, and I think there's times when it happens very naturally. I know when I look out at nature as an example, I feel this unconditional love for the nature that I'm looking at, because as far as I'm concerned, it's all perfect. However it is, the craggy mountains and the stream running through and wildflowers and the weeds and all of that, it's just perfection to me. And so the love I feel to be part of that vista is unconditional, unless my car runs out of gas and there's no way I can connect with anybody to get myself out of there. And then I might not feel so beautifully inclined, or maybe a wild animal runs after me and I'm not sure if I'm going to make it out of there alive. Well, so there are situations that crop up and can just instantly cause us to re-examine or change direction in what we most out of what we most want and into a state that's less desirable than that. So is there a process that we can use to move from conditional to unconditional? So what might that be? How would that play itself out in the whole scheme of things? Well, I think I guess another word that I would use for conditional is expectations. So when I think of how we have expectations of other people's, not just behavior, it could be the way they look, it is the way they act for sure. And if that's at odds with what we deem to be natural, normal, we judge it to be the way we think it should be, and it's not, then of course it's conditional. So as an example, years ago, we have an auditorium here in the city called the Jubilee Auditorium that holds maybe 2 to 5,000 people. Well, this is one of the city's entertainment centers, so they have concerts there and plays and so on. Well, when I was growing up, if you had tickets to the Jubilee Auditorium, then this was a fancy night out and you dressed up. Didn't matter whether you were a young girl, a teenager, grandmother, you dressed up because everybody did. That was to honor the importance of the evening, and so everybody did. And you'd go when there's all this glitter and glamour, and you kind of ooh and ah at all the pretty dresses and of the women and the nice suits that the men had on and so on. And it was just part of the experience and that was the way they did things. Well, over time, I hadn't been to the Jubilee for quite a few years. And the next time I had tickets and go, and I'm dressed up, of course, as I plan to be. And I look around and there's all kinds of people in blue jeans and t-shirts, and I was shocked. And there was a part of me that was just incensed. Like, I was highly indignant about this. And I thought, what is wrong with these people that they can't just honor the occasion and dress up? You've come to a special place for a special evening and you wear that? So, and then well, over time, I've had a chance to examine that a little more thoroughly. And I'm thinking, what does it matter? They honor the event by showing up, first of all. So they've spent their hard-earned money to have a ticket, or they came because somebody gave them a ticket. And, it's possible that that's the best that they have. And what does it matter anyway? What do clothes matter anyway? As long as, and then of course, oh, well, they were properly clothed. And so that's okay. And so all of a sudden I had all of these conditions of, well, if I'm going to enjoy this experience, it better, people around me better look good, and people around me better behave well, and people around me, I'm going, oh my goodness. So we do put conditions upon our level of enjoyment and what's going on. So how do we move from that? Well, one way is to examine exactly what it is you're feeling about this, and what you're saying to yourself about that, and ask the question, is that really true? Is it true that people who are dressed in blue jeans have no regard for the importance of this occasion? Well, no, it's not true as far as I know. I can't prove that. Oh, well, maybe that's just a judgment. Yeah, well, pretty well. And so I could let that go. I say, okay, fine. And, is it really true that, and so you keep questioning, and then pretty soon you say, you know what? We're all here for the love of whatever's going to be going on next. So let's just sit back and enjoy it. Who cares if people are dressed differently than I am? I'm dressed the way I want to be because that's the way I wanted to dress. And obviously they did the same. They showed up. So let's enjoy the performance and revel in the magic that's about to happen next. So it's changing your mind. It's taking your mindset from whatever it was, your point of view that you had of being adamant about the way things should go, and saying, well, what if it isn't that important? What if it shouldn't happen that way? Because that isn't the way it's happening. Byron Katie is masterful at helping people look at exactly what this whole questioning is all about, to get to the truth of the matter for you. Because for lots of situations, we're not looking at the truth of it. We're looking at assumptions, at beliefs, at things other people told us that we don't even know are true. And so, but if we never examine them, if we don't take it apart to see if we need to think differently, then do I still like it if everybody dresses up to go to the concert? Yeah, I do, because that's my preference. But it's inappropriate for me to think badly of someone who didn't or couldn't dress up. So that's just a very simple example of how that. So I think it's entirely possible to move from conditional to unconditional with some effort. It takes, I guess, some courage, and it takes some conscious awareness of what you just were thinking. Because so many of our programs and the beliefs that we have rolling around in our heads are automatic. It's just no different than you automatically turn, well, I do anyway on my car. I turn the key and put my foot on the brake, turn the key. Car starts. Don't even hardly think about it. And check my mirrors and do all those pre-trip things that are just automatic now. I don't question them. Well, same thing with the thoughts in our heads. We don't question what we're thinking exactly, other than based on whatever feeling it tends to trigger. And we don't often question where that came from. Where did that come from? Like my woman driver example, where did that come from? So I thought about that, and I thought, oh yeah, there's some voices out of the past, most of them male, that women drivers, and it was an unfair labeling, but nonetheless, there it was, and I didn't even know I was carrying that around anymore until I had a chance to look at it. All right. So then let's look at this process of suspending judgment, because this is such a big one. I had this hit me right in the face big time this week with a scenario that's been going on. And the labeling of right and wrong, good and bad, comes from our quest for contrast when we come to planet Earth. I mean, in my understanding of what goes on in the universe, and my living of that briefly, was that everything is all that it is, and okay. So contrast, as we see it on planet Earth, doesn't exist there. There's no, well, this is cold, this is hot, this is light, this is dark, this is green, this is blue. There's really, that just doesn't exist. But in learning and growing and experiencing on planet Earth, one of the things we most want to do when we come here is to try all that on. And you see babies right from the time their senses start to come alive. If they're cold, they might cry, oh, I'm cold, and they don't even know what that is. They just know that something different than what they like is happening. Or if they're hungry as opposed to full, or if they're wet as opposed to not wet. So all of these things we learn right from taking our first breath, and we start experiencing our world around us with contrast. So the room is very bright or the room is very dark. I'm feeling warm in my mother's arms. I'm feeling cold in my bed, and on it goes. And out of that experience of contrast, we do develop our preferences for what's most important. So you've probably seen your child maybe spit out broccoli and gobble down carrots, or not like cheese, but they really like apples. And so some of it relates to texture, some of it relates to taste, some of it sensation, flavor, and so on. So we deliberately start picking and choosing, say, yes, this, not that, yes, this, not that. Where the challenge comes in with judgment is, at some point, it's made wrong when we pick a preference, or we have a preference, or choose something different than somebody else. What's wrong with you that you don't like peas? Peas are good for you. Just eat them. And So we're made to be less than because we don't like peas. And we don't even know why we don't like peas. We just know that we don't like them. So this good, bad, right, or wrong is the judgment. It's the saying, okay, because you're different in your preferences than I am in mine, there must be something wrong with you because I really, really, really like this and you don't. So, I mean, the difference if you're reading a book, some people love these horror stories, not me. I don't like to be that scared, and I don't like scary movies either. I'm thinking, I can scare myself enough without experiencing that. Do I call down people who like horror stories and horror movies? No. Hey, fill your boots. If you want, you want to pay your money for that, go for it. But don't expect me to get involved because that's not my thing. So it's as simple as that, except that there's kind of gray areas when we look at, I guess, the right and wrongs of our society. Because let's face it, with free will, free will doesn't mean that you can get to do whatever you want regardless. If your free will impinges on someone else's free will, then you need to take a step back and say, oh, okay, well, I have free will, so I can speed down the highway at 200 miles an hour, except, well, that might be fine if you're the only car on the road, but what about the other people's free will to be on that freeway at the same time and to get to where they're going safely? You're putting all the others at risk because of the way you're driving. So when we look at free will, there's, I guess, two parts. The one part is well, everybody has free will, and you don't really have a right to step on anybody else's free will. So how are we going to deal with that? Because we work in relationship to others. We're not hermits on a mountaintop and have no relation to anybody or anything else. We have a relation to our environment. We have a relation to each other. So there's something that needs to shift in the way we deal with that. The other part of free will is that we accept the consequences of whatever we choose. That's just goes right along with it. So if we choose unwisely, then we're accepting the consequences of. So if I'm speeding down the highway at 200 miles an hour and I run into something or someone, then my consequences could be dire. I could have caused the loss of someone else's life, property damage, all manner of things. And there's the consequence of that, which is on my shoulders. Am I a bad person for having made that choice? No. Um, I might have made a choice that was ill-advised, and someone else didn't like that choice, but it doesn't make me a bad person. I'm not the sum total of all the choices that I make in life. I'm even bigger than that. It's just that in my human experience, that sum total of all the choices will dictate to a certain extent the course of my life until I make changes that shift that course. So I think the process from going from judgment to acceptance, especially if it's in relation to another person. So when we're, well, and also in relation to ourselves, let me just clarify that a little bit, is to first seek to understand, like, what's going on. If I'm having a wrangle with someone else who is in disagreement, or they've done something that has triggered deep unhappiness in me, then I want to follow through and say, well, what is that all about for them? Do I have any sense of why they might have done that? What was going on with them at the time that caused them to make that decision or push them in that direction? Like, what is that? What they chose to do that? Well, it had some negative consequences. So why did they choose that? You may or may not get an answer to that. You may or may not have any understanding of it. I can give you an example. My younger sister, when she was going through cancer, made some choices with her treatment that I did not think were going to serve her in any way, shape, or form. But because I didn't feel I also didn't feel that I had the right to judge that, to judge her choices. I let it be. But I was still uneasy about that. And I came to a peace about it at one point when I thought, I have no idea what her journey on earth is for. And even though we both went through cancer, her cancer journey is very different than mine was. And there's no way that I can even know what the end result of that is for her soul's purpose, her reason for choosing the way she did. And so it's not, judgment is inappropriate. There's no point me judging that. Even though I disagreed with what was going on, I couldn't judge her for that and say, oh, she's so wrong to do that way and so on. That serves no purpose. And so I sought as best I could to understand. And even though I couldn't come up with any definitive answers, when I realized that I had no way of knowing what her journey was meant to be and what the purpose of those choices was supposed to result in, then I let it go. I just said, well, then I accept, because I can't know what this is all about. I accept that somehow this will be for her highest good, even if I don't know what that is at this point and may never know. So I had to come to that whole conclusion for myself. So it's that questioning that well, why am I thinking that way, and is that really about them, or is it about me and where I'm coming from? And of course, if I have ever done something similar that I'm judging, or thought about doing something similar that I'm judging, well, then I better think again, because it's important that if I can move to accepting that, okay, well, they did that it doesn't make them a bad person. It just means that either they made a mistake, or it was an error in judgment, or they needed to learn what the consequences of that would be. Okay, well, I've done the same thing. I have no, what's that thing about glass houses and casting the first stone? Well, we're all part and parcel of the same human condition, and we need to cut each other some slack. I guess the one thing that helps me with judgment, with suspending judgment or moving away from judgment, is to say, on any given day, we're all just doing the best that we can, and to allow for that and say, well, maybe this is the worst day they've had in a long time, and I just happen to witness the worst of it. And where's my compassion? Can I have some compassion for that choice, rather than getting all righteous and up in their grill about whatever had gone on? Maybe I can step back and say, wow, I got some compassion for what they must be going through. So we bring that in as well. So I was thinking about more tools to experience more heaven. So if we want in the Magnificence matrix to have more peace in our lives, to experience more joy, to let ourselves out of the self-created hell that I know I go to all too often. Thank goodness I have the keys to the door to let myself out. Sometimes it takes a while to find the keys, but I do let myself back out and say, come on now, that's not where you want to live. And I go do my best to work my way back to a heaven on earth state. And it is a state, by the way. Heaven is not a place. I guess if you're going to call it a place, then it's within the heart. I mean, heaven is in the heart space. And that's where, if we take time to get out of our heads and move into our heart space, that's where all the good stuff resides. And I've heard that over and over from people experiencing near death who said, yeah, that's it. It's a state of being. It's not a place. Although we can imagine it as a place if we want to. There's nothing wrong with that. So how do we get more heaven? How do we experience more heaven? Well, one of the ways is to stop blindly allowing whatever jumps into your head as the absolute truth, is to question everything. So some internal observation. Often for me, it's a feeling. So I'll have what we could label as a negative feeling. So I'll have something that upsets me or I'm uneasy about or that feels off. It's not peaceful. It's not joyful. It's the opposite of that. And I'll go, what the heck is going on here? So then, of course, that feeling trigger puts me into, okay, let me think about what's just happening in this situation here. And that internal observation of, sure, I explore, if there's another individual involved, I explore what's going on in relation to the situation. But then it doesn't take very long before I flip that around and point that right back to me and say, okay, what is really going on in relation to this with me? Why am I so upset about that? What is it that I'm doing or not doing that is causing this particular anguish or whatever? And the reflection of that, because other people are great mirrors for us, right? And they'll do something and we think it's all to do with them. And then if we're aware and if we take time to reflect on that, we have this internal observation. It doesn't take very long before we start thinking about, oh, that was just a perfect mirror for me. I needed to see that in them in order to have it get me thinking about changing my mind or changing my behavior or whatever. So one example I could give is a scenario of someone dear who was going through a huge health crisis, and a lot of it related to not having been that active for some time, physically active. And well, as I thought about that, I thought, okay, Sue, that's you too. You know, you have not been as physically active despite what your doctor suggested to you at one point about exercise and activity. You've been too much of either a couch potato or a sit in front of your computer person. I've warmed my computer chair far too long, far too often. Well, that got me thinking, and it also got me taking action. So this reflection, and so rather than staying irritated about that, excuse me, in relation to the other person, I took that to heart and really said, gee, thanks for the gift. I needed to see that in myself so that I could change my own behavior for the better. So we can mirror for each other what's going on with this. Where the process falls down is if we don't do the internal observation and reflection and say, well, okay, I see them in me. So a quick example of that. So for example, if you have a friend that you really admire and say, oh, they're so together and they're very energetic and they're very they have a strong personality and they can really speak their mind, and you admire all those things that you see in this other person. Well, you would not know what those characteristics or qualities were. You wouldn't recognize them if you didn't also have them in you. You may not have them in the same quantity that you see in this other person. They may have more than you, but you wouldn't even notice it if you had none of it. So obviously those qualities also apply to you. So what you admire in someone else, you admire it because it's in you, because you recognize that and you resonate with it. Same thing with anybody else's faults. The things we label. I don't like this in this person. They're this, and they're this, and they're this, and they're lazy, and and you have this long list. Well, turn that around and say, okay, what in me does exactly that? What in me is exactly that? Yeah, okay. We don't like having our shortcomings pointed out. And when we see them in other people, because it sparks in us, we're kind of, I didn't really want to look at that in me right now. And so I'm really angry that they're doing it. So it's really easy to just place the blame all on them and judge them for the way they are, and not take any of that to heart, not realize that we are all one, that what's going on inside them is also going on inside of us. And as a result, it often acts outwardly, and we see the manifestation of that. So when we do that, then we start to have some compassion, more compassion for the other person and more compassion for ourselves, where we say, hey, they're just doing the best they can. I see them struggling with that. Yeah, I'm struggling with that too, or I have in the past, and every once in a while I still struggle with it. So you cut them some slack as best you can, and cut yourself some slack too. The other part of that comes along then is the topic of forgiveness. I thought it was interesting when I was listening to this Michael Tamura, because he was talking about forgiveness. He said, not to make yourself the better person. Oh, well, what you did to me really upset me, but I forgive you. It's not about that. And it's really about, and he said this, that it's really about, when you forgive, it allows you to let go of any bitterness and anger around that. Well, of course, if we're totally wrapped up in bitterness and anger and resentment and all of those negative things, we're in a hell of our own making. We absolutely are. So the forgiveness aspect is to it's not about the other person or the situation or whatever. It's about letting go of that so that you can move, because resentments and bitterness and hatreds and old anger and so on keeps us stuck, keeps us right where we are, mired in the muck, and it's hard to move until we have that grace of forgiveness that says, I'm not willing to carry this anymore. I'm not willing to shoulder the burden and have this eat away at me and eat away at me and eat away at me. And believe me, physically it will. So I always advocate for forgiveness. I think there was, I'm not a very good remembering my Bible, but I do remember that Jesus said something about forgiving 70 times 7. Well, who is it that we're actually forgiving? Really, it's ourselves we're forgiving. We're forgiving ourselves for our misperception, for labeling, for judging, for not accepting and loving unconditionally. It's all about that. And I find that more and more, I spend a lot more time forgiving myself for little things throughout the day. I think an unkind thought about someone, and oh, Sue, I'm going to forgive you for thinking that unkind thought, because it wasn't right and it wasn't true. And and then I let it go. And I do find, because I've been more in the habit of it lately, I find that I feel freer. I feel lighter. I feel more at peace in my whole universe. And there's more of that experiencing moment by moment, that heaven on earth that I feel is freely available to all of us. It does, though, take some focus. It takes some focus. It takes some work. It's simple, but you may not find it easy at first. And I'd like to say I found it easy, and I haven't found it that easy. It's simple enough to do. It's just the follow through sometimes is not as easy. And it's worth it to me to keep at it. So I keep going. All right. So that's pretty well all I wanted to talk about today in relation to heaven on earth, in relation to the idea of near-death experiences and what we can get from it. We don't have to have a near-death experience in order to live heaven on earth. We just absolutely don't. We can take a page from other people who have experienced that. It may not be in our life plan that we'll need that kind of an experience. We can piggyback on the experiences of others. And I highly recommend that and say, okay, what do we have to learn? Well, unconditional love, as I said before, that peace and joy that is part of that heavenly feeling that can wash through us. Anything we can do to get there by suspending our judgment, by questioning our prejudices, our seemingly hard to release hatreds, our fears, all of those kinds of things, in the light of day and when you examine them closely, probably are not as big as you thought they were. And in fact, if you relinquish them, if you let go of them, if you replace them with more loving thoughts, more kind thoughts, more forgiving thoughts, it's a whole lot easier to move to where you most want to be. So I encourage you to try on some of these ideas and examples. That's it for tonight. Just a little housekeeping for next month. So this particular workshop, Pathways to Magnificence, happens the first Tuesday of every month. So we've had September, so the next one will be Tuesday, October the 1st, Mountain Time, 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. Next month, we're going to start exploring the stories that shape us. So where do our stories come from, and how do they impact us as we strive to get through our lives from point A to whenever we decide it's time to go back to spirit and have a different experience. So that's what's coming up next. Now, just a little bit of a word about the Magnificence Lab, which is who sponsors this particular workshop. If you desire to start, or you already have some kind of a heart-centered business in the areas of health, wealth, or wisdom, and you really want to inspire others in their own magnificence, then I'd love you to consider becoming a member of the Magnificence Lab. We have a monthly membership that you could be part of. This virtual membership community has like-minded messengers, and each of us desire to make a difference in the world. We meet once a week for 90 minutes to walk each other home in our endeavors to learn and grow in being able to do the work that we're most called to do in the world. And I feel so blessed that I have like-minded individuals who want to be a part of the Magnificence Lab in this way. All you have to do is go to magnificencelab.org /invite, fill out the application, and we'll be back in touch and chat a little bit more about what it means to be a member of the Magnificence Lab. Great, everyone. I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, October the 1st. This is a free workshop. So if you have people from anywhere in the world who have access to a Zoom connection and would like to weigh in on the next workshop, feel free to invite them, pass the link along to them. More the merrier. It's always great to have lots of dialogue and discussion around these topics. Take good care. You know you are magnificent enough to find and rest in your own heaven on earth. I wish you all the best as you do that.